You are going to burn out at some point while making your comic. It's really common, really normal, and it's not a sign that you should stop creating your comic. But it is a sign that you've probably taken on a little bit too much. And in this video, I'm going to show you not only why that is, but how you can fix it, because you're not going to burn out just once. You know about Parkinson's law? Work fills the time provided, that thing? We do that a lot, and it's one of the main reasons why we burn out so much. If you look at an empty calendar and you filled out your real world responsibilities like a job, kids, family, and keeping yourself alive, and you notice all the empty spaces around those things, do you fill it with stuff? I do. At least I did. You've got an hour in the morning, so you'll do a study, or you've got 3 hours in the evenings before you need to be asleep, so you'll use that time to work on your comic. Stuff like that. It feels good, doesn't it? It makes you feel productive and like you're heading towards hitting your goals. And looking at the calendar in your current state of mind where you feel really good, there's no problems. So what is the problem? Imagine that this jar represents all the time and energy you have in a given day. And because we're probably not working on our comic full time, our jar probably looks more like this before we've even started working on our comic. We have jobs and other responsibilities away from comics that fill up our time and energy. So we only have this amount of time left to work on our comics. And most of us fill the rest of this jar up with working on our comic because we have no other choice. But the problem with this is that you're now running on your maximum capacity, not just as a comic creator, but as a person. And so when life gets in the way, or you're feeling especially stressed or anxious about something, there's no room to maneuver. These suites don't just represent the tasks that you need to do, they also represent your energy levels and your emotions. On day 1, you'll feel great, but by day 3 or 4, you may be suffering from a lack of sleep or high anxiety and stress because of your job or life in general. And if your jar is full, you're not going to be able to tackle those issues. And that's one of the reasons we tend to burn out. In fact, I'd go as far as to say it's the main reason we burn out. So how do we fix this? Fortunately, the answer is simple, but it doesn't mean it's easy. The answer is not to have a full jar. Instead of filling it like this, fill it like this, where you have some room to maneuver. I used this metaphor entirely so I had an excuse to buy 2 full bags of Skittles. And I'm not going to apologize for it. But let's move away from that for now before I eat them all and look at a calendar. In my calendar here, I have Flowers and Shadows, which is my comic, penciled in here. I'll come on to how to use calendars effectively in a bit, but I want to focus on the time that I've allocated for my comic. I've got 7 PM till 9:30 PM, and there's a very intentional reason for that. I know that I could work from 7 PM to 11 PM with no problem. I can and have gone beyond that. But that's me working with a full jar. And I know from experience that by my 2nd or 3rd week, I'm going to start experiencing burnout. It will start by feeling more frustrating with my drawing skills and being harsher on myself. I'll feel more sluggish and tired and start to get aches and pains. And if I ignore it because the comic must be done above all else, then I'm going to get to a point where I don't want to do it anymore. I'll want to start again, or worse, I won't want to make comics at all. It's too hard, too stressful, I'm too tired and in pain. And so by giving myself a little bit of room by finishing at 9:30 instead of 11 PM, it means that by the time I come back to the comic the following evening, I'm coming back feeling fresh. And the thing is, I'll keep coming back month after month with similar levels of energy and motivation, which is the key for long-term consistency and success. By using a calendar, it's a really useful tool for tracking what you need to do for both your comic and life in general. But they can also be quite rigid, which I don't like. I used to be really inflexible when it came to my calendar. If I wrote down that I was working on my comic on a Wednesday, then I'll be working on my comic on a Wednesday, no matter what. But life isn't as simple or as easy as that, and there may be stuff that happens that prohibits you from working on your comic on any given Wednesday. Fortunately, there are a few things that you can guard against the randomness of life. The first thing you can do is have 1 or 2 days in your week as catch-up days. If I can't work on my comic on a Wednesday for any particular reason, then that's fine because I can just shift everything over by 1 day. I can move into these blank spaces on the weekend if I need to, or I can skip a practice session, which I have here. If you're finding that you're having to do this quite a lot, then you may need to reevaluate your calendar and shift things around a bit more. But if it's only happening a couple of times, then just learn to roll with the punches. Having a planner is one of the main reasons why I don't really stress about this anymore. Certainly nowhere near as much as I used to. because I know that everything that I need is in there, including a calendar and a task list, so that I can keep on track in case my schedule has to move around. Little plug there for my Notion template, link in the description. The other thing that you can do, which will help you so much, is to understand how to track progress effectively. Most of us care way too much what happens week on week because we're not very good at looking too far ahead into the future. But to track progress, particularly when it comes to things like art and comics, you have to look at a much wider time frame than a week. Ideally, you want to look at the difference between years if you really want to see progress, but even I admit a year is quite a long time. So I recommend that you check in with yourself every month and just reflect on what you've been able to achieve. Use this time not only to recognize what you've accomplished, which is important, but to adjust your calendar based on what is and isn't working. If a month is too long and you feel like you're very likely to forget what you've done, then just take note at the end of each day of what you've done and then collate that at the end of the month. It's one of the reasons why I've got a journal within my comic planner for this exact thing, but if you don't want to use that, then use something like a whiteboard. There's mine. It doesn't have to be fancy. I've literally just got a list of stuff that I need to do. I've only got 2 weeks up there at the moment, but I'm going to put the full month in, and so I can reflect back on it all in one place. So all of that is about managing your tasks while you're feeling pretty good and energetic to prevent burnout in the first place. But what if you're already feeling burnt out? Burnout is sneaky and it often appears without us really realizing it. So this is what you do. I'm going to use the sweets again. The first thing to do when you realize that you're in burnout is just take a day or two to rest. Sometimes that's all you'll need, but oftentimes when you come back after a rest day, you feel exactly the same way as you did before. And that's because rest isn't necessarily a cure for burnout, but it can give you the energy that you need to take action, which is what you need to do to tackle it. Now, if you're feeling burnt out and jump straight back into your biggest task, then you're likely to burn out again because you're probably feeling pretty overwhelmed. Conversely, if you only do little tasks, then you may end up procrastinating instead of tackling your comic. So we need to Goldilocks this situation. These sweets are your little tasks. They are the tasks that represent 10% of your overall goals. So it might be posting to social media, watching YouTube tutorials, responding to messages, writing emails, and so on. These sweets are your medium tasks. They represent 30% of your overall goals. These are things like investing in yourself, which includes doing studies to improve your craft, and taking care of your body through diet, exercise, and sleep. And these sweets are your big tasks. This represents 60% of your overall goals and is basically your comic. It's the main thing that you produce and are trying to build. When you're feeling burnt out, the tasks that you need to tackle are the 30% tasks. They're not quite so big and daunting as your comic, but they're not so little that they're not moving the needle enough for you to gather some momentum. They're just right. Now, the way that you slice up your tasks doesn't need to be the same as how I've done it. I've just used that as an example to give you an idea of how you could do it. We're all different, and so this will look different to each of us. But regardless of how you prioritize your tasks, there's one thing that will have a positive impact on all of us, which is exercise. Now, I'm not talking about aerobics or going to the gym because fuck that. I'm talking about a 5-minute walk outside. That's all you need. While I was at university studying comics at the height of the pandemic, I would have my morning lecture and then I'd go for a 40-minute walk. Then by the time that I came back, I was feeling really good and positive and energetic, and I put all of that energy into my comics. Now, granted, you probably don't have time for a 40-minute walk. I sure as hell don't, but just a 5 or 10-minute walk around your block can make a huge difference for you. And if you're not able to do that for whatever reason, then just go outside for 5 or 10 minutes and just breathe. Once you've done this, try and tackle your big task, which is probably your comic. If you don't feel any different, then do another 30% task, like doing a study, for example. And if you feel like nothing is working, then you need to reevaluate your jar. Maybe this is a sign that you've taken on too much, and so you need to either drop tasks entirely or you need to extend the deadlines of the tasks that you've set. So if your deadline for completing your comic is 6 months from now, change it to 9 months. In the grand scheme of things, does it really matter? Yes, it's annoying, and of course we want to complete our comics faster, but if by going a little bit slower it increases our chances of our comics actually being completed, then it's worth it. I'd rather take an extra 3 months to complete my comic if it meant that I was going to enjoy the process more and, very likely as a result of that, create a better comic. Will this way of doing things help all of you? Possibly not. We all have different experiences and different situations. But if what I've talked about in this video doesn't help, then what I talk about in this one will.